she said. "I have feelings for you, just not romantic ones." That sentence cut through the air like glass shattering on tile. I remember blinking at her, the words barely processing, my brain lagging behind reality. The worst part, I didn't even feel angry, just hollow. Because in my car, parked 3 floors below our apartment, sat a small velvet box containing the ring I'd spent 3 weeks choosing. A ring I was planning to give her this coming weekend. Under the sakura trees at the riverside park where we first kissed. My name is Evan, 29M, and the woman sitting across from me, nervously twisting her bracelet, was Lila. To 7EF, my girlfriend of almost 3 years. We'd been living together for 1.5 years in a cozy apartment overlooking the bustling streets of Osaka every night. She'd curl up beside me on the couch, her head on my shoulder, and talk about everything her pottery business, the stray cat that always appeared on our balcony, the ramen shop we both loved. I thought those little moments were our love language. Turns out they were just routine for her. When she said those words, not romantic ones, I could feel something in my chest quietly folding in on itself. But outwardly, I just nodded. "I understand," I told her calmly. "Thanks for being honest." Her eyes widened a little, as if she was expecting tears, maybe even begging. Instead, I turned back to my laptop and resumed working on the marketing pitch due the next morning. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I just clicked through slides while the sound of my heart slowing down filled the silence. "That's it?" she asked after a few seconds, confusion creeping into her tone. "You're not going to say anything else?" I looked up. "What would you like me to say, Lila?" "You clarified how you feel. That's helpful information." She stood there for a moment, searching my face, probably hoping for a some proof that her confession mattered enough to break me. When she realized it wasn't coming, she muttered something under her breath and left the room. Later that night, I heard her on the phone with her friends. Her voice carried faintly through the thin paper walls of our apartment. They were praising her for being brave, for being emotionally mature, for handling things so honestly. I almost laughed. They had no idea that while they celebrated her self-awareness, I was sitting in the dark, deleting my proposal draft speech from my phone notes. By morning, I'd made a decision. I drove to the jewelry store during my lunch break, handed the small box to the clerk, and said, "I'd like to return this." He looked at me with that knowing expression, the one that said he'd seen this story 100 times before. When he handed me back the 400,000 yuan refund receipt, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. A strange, quiet sense that the universe had yanked me away from a disaster I was too blind to see back at home. Lila was sitting at the kitchen counter, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone like nothing had changed. She smiled faintly when I walked in, as if expecting everything to go back to normal now that she'd cleared the air. "How was work?" she asked casually. "Productive," I replied, setting down my bag. "I made some financial adjustments today." She didn't even ask what I meant. And maybe that was the first sign she had stopped really listening to me long before she confessed anything that night. When she suggested watching our favorite drama together, I told her I needed some time to think. Her face fell, like she couldn't understand why her honesty would require any adjustment on my part. That was when I realized it. She didn't just want out of romancy, wanted the comfort without the commitment, the love without the label, the care without the cost. But I wasn't built to give half of myself anymore. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the city filling the silence between us. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was simply empty. And deep down, in that emptiness, I could already feel something beginning to change, slowly, quietly, but irreversibly, the kind of change that doesn't announce itself with tears or shouting, the kind that builds strength in silence. The days that followed felt oddly, come almost eerily so. Lila behaved as if nothing monumental had happened, as if her confession had been just another adult conversation between mature people. She still left her mug in the sink every morning, still played her soft lo-fi playlist while working on her pottery, still texted me midday memes like before. But for me, something fundamental had shifted. I started seeing everything in our apartment differently. Her hair clip, left on the counter, wasn't endearing anymore, it was careless. Her laughter, once my favorite sound, now carried a faint note of distance. Even the faint scent of her jasmine perfume lingering on the couch made my stomach twist, so I began to adjust, just as she had asked me to. The first change came quietly. I stopped bringing her morning matcha latte from the cafe near my office, the one that took me 15 extra minutes every day. She noticed on the second morning. "Hey, no latte today?" she asked, standing at the counter in her oversized sweatshirt, hair tied up messily. "I didn't think friends usually do daily coffee runs," I said simply. She blinked, surprised, and laughed awkwardly. "Right? Yeah? You're right." But I could tell she didn't like it. By the end of the week, I had stopped making breakfast for two. My Sunday pancakes, something she once called her favorite tradition, were now a single-serving ritual. When she wandered into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes, I was already eating. "Where's mine?" she asked half-jokingly. "I only made enough for myself," I said, pouring maple syrup over the last bite. "You can use the pan after I'm done." She stared at me for a few seconds, her expression frozen somewhere between hurt and disbelief. "You love cooking for me." "I used to love doing things for someone I loved," I corrected. "But friends, don't do that every weekend." That landed harder than I expected. She went quiet for the rest of the morning. Over the next 2 weeks, the unraveling continued, small, subtle steps that dismantled our relationship without any dramatic explosions. When her laptop started glitching, she handed it to me instinctively. "Can you fix this? It's been acting weird all day." I didn't even look up from my desk. "You should probably take it to the Apple Store. They'll run diagnostics." Her tone sharpened. "You always fix it for me." "I used to," I said evenly. Friends don't usually provide free tech support. The words hung there like cold air between us. Then came the finances. For months, I had covered the bigger share of rent and household expenses without thinking twice. Love made it easy. But love wasn't part of the equation anymore. So, one night, I sat down at the dining table and recalculated everything: groceries, subscriptions, cleaning supplies, and printed a neat breakdown sheet. When I handed it to her, she frowned. "You're keeping track of all this now?" "I wasn't before," I said gently. "But now that we're just friends, it seems fair." The next morning, all the expensive bottles of shampoo and imported skincare vanished from the bathroom shelf, replaced by simple local brands. I didn't announce it. I just stopped subsidizing luxury for someone who no longer wanted me as a partner. That weekend, she tried to log into Netflix and found herself locked out. "Evan, did you change the password?" she called out. "I cancelled the shared accounts," I said, flipping through a magazine. It didn't make sense to keep them joint. Her voice rose. That's petty. It's appropriate, I replied calmly. Couples share streaming accounts. Friends don't. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. At night, I'd hear her pacing quietly in the living room. Sometimes she'd stand in the doorway of my study, watching me type. You're different lately, she said once, almost like a plea. I'm just treating you the way you said you wanted. I replied without looking up. The truth was, I wasn't trying to punish her. I was simply adjusting the volume of my affection to match her turning down the warmth, the effort, the quiet acts of care that used to fill our days. And as I did, something unexpected began to happen. I started breathing easier. The weight I hadn't realized I was carrying, the constant effort to prove my worth. To make her happy was lifting, piece by piece. One night, as I lay awake, listening to the rain tapping against the window, I realized I wasn't waiting for her to change anymore. I wasn't waiting for the maybe someday she had dangled in front of me like a promise. I was, for the first time in years, simply existing for myself, and somewhere deep down, I think that scared her more than anything. It had been nearly a month since Lila's honest conversation, and the balance of our apartment had shifted in ways neither of us could ignore. What was once a home full of shared laughter and small gestures had turned into a space of quiet transactions, polite, distant, almost sterile. She still spoke to me like nothing monumental had changed, asking about my day, about work, about what I wanted for dinner. But the warmth was gone. Every sentence now carried that thin layer of tension, that unspoken awareness that we weren't us anymore. One evening, she came into the kitchen while I was cooking dinner for myself. Simple stir-fried noodles with vegetables. That smells amazing, she said, hovering near the counter. Can I have some? I looked up at her and said, I made just enough for one, but there's more noodles in the pantry if you want to cook for yourself. Her lips parted slightly in disbelief. You're really serious about this? Friends thing, huh? I'm just respecting the boundaries you asked for, I said, my tone even. Friends don't cook each other dinner every night. She went silent for a long moment, then turned away without saying anything. I could feel her frustration brewing, but I stayed quiet. That weekend was her 27th birthday. In the past, I'd spend weeks planning surprises, handwritten letters, small gifts, weekend trips to Kyoto or her. This time, I left a small gift bag on the kitchen table, a neatly wrapped box and a handwritten note that simply said, Happy birthday, Leela. Hope you have a relaxing day. Inside was a 3,000 yuan gift card to Muji. When she came home from her pottery studio and saw it, she frowned. That's it, I nodded. We could grab dinner later if you'd like. I know a nice Italian place near Shinsebashi. We can split the bill. Her face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. Surprise, hurt, disbelief, then anger. You're kidding, right? It's my birthday. I smiled politely. That's why I got you the gift card. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the person standing in front of her. And maybe she didn't. Maybe she was seeing the man she'd taken for granted. The man who'd always prioritized her happiness, finally stepping out of the role she'd written for him that night. She ordered takeout and ate alone in the living room. I went to meet some friends for drinks. When I returned, she was sitting on the couch, surrounded by empty containers, scrolling through her phone, eyes glossy but defiant. I can't believe you're treating me like this, she said quietly. Like what? Like I don't matter to you anymore. I sat across from her, calm, tired. You matter, Lila. Just differently now. You asked for friendship. And this is what friendship looks like. Friends don't plan surprises or spend hundreds on birthdays. They send a message, maybe grab dinner if schedules align. You wanted honesty, right? This is the honest version of us. She didn't reply. She just stared at the TV screen, motionless. For a moment, I almost felt bad. But then I remembered the ring I'd returned, the proposal I'd erased from my future, and the ease with which she'd dismantled everything we'd built. Sympathy faded as quickly as it came. A few weeks later, she caught the flu. In the past, I'd drop everything, bring her tea, make soup, stay home to take care of her. This time, I texted from work, "Hope you feel better soon. Make sure to rest and drink plenty of water." That night, she was bundled up on the couch when I got home, tissues and medicine scattered around her. "You didn't even check on me today," she said hoarsely. "I did," I said, setting my briefcase down. "I texted you," her voice cracked. "You used to make me soup when I was sick. I used to be in love with you," I said gently. "Now, I'm your friend, and friends usually just send get-well texts." For the first time, she didn't argue. She just looked at me, really looked at me, with that dawning realization that her choice had consequences she never anticipated. The following weeks became a series of quiet reckonings. I'd come home to find her sitting silently at the dining table, pottery clay still on her fingers, eyes distant. Sometimes she'd start conversations out of nowhere about old memories, about things we used to do, about trips we never took. Her voice always carried that hint of nostalgia, like she was trying to summon a version of us that no longer existed. But I didn't respond with the same warmth anymore. My words were polite but measured, my tone friendly but detached. Because the truth was, once someone tells you they can't love you the way you love them, there's no going back. You can forgive them, you can even stay friends, but something essential, something sacred, dies the moment they say those words, and I wasn't about to resurrect a love that had been buried by her own hands, little by little. Leela began to understand that, and that understanding hurt her more than any argument ever could. By the time winter rolled around, the rhythm of our friendship had solidified into something mechanical. We shared a roof, divided bills, exchanged small talk about groceries or electricity usage, but the intimacy that once filled our apartment had evaporated entirely. She still tried to hold on to fragments of what we were. One Sunday morning, she appeared at my door holding her laptop like a peace offering. "Hey, the Wi-Fi keeps dropping again. Can you check the router?" I didn't even look up from my work. "The router's fine. Maybe call the provider. Friends don't usually offer home tech support for free, remember." Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She backed away, murmuring, "Right, friends." The apartment became quiet after that. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from people walking carefully around unspoken truths. Then came the night she broke. It was snowing outside, tiny flakes brushing against the window as I packed boxes for my new condo in Sapporo's suburbs. The air smelled of cardboard and cold air. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me. "You're really leaving?" she said finally. "Our lease ends in 2 weeks," I replied without turning. "But you bought a place." "Yes," I said. "I mentioned it a month ago." Her voice wavered. "You bought it without even talking to me." I put the tape down and looked at her calmly. Do friends consult each other on buying property? That landed like a slap. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind outside. Then she stepped closer, her expression trembling between anger and desperation. Evan, I think I made a mistake, she whispered. About everything. About us. I didn't speak. I just waited. I was scared, she said, tears gathering in her eyes. I thought maybe if we stayed friends, my feelings would come back. But now, I know I love you. I do. Her confession hung in the air like smoke thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Leela, I said quietly, love doesn't arrive on a delay. You had years of my heart, my patience, my effort. I don't hate you, but I don't love you anymore either. I stopped waiting for you the day you decided you didn't want me. She stepped back as if the words had pushed her. So, that's it. I nodded. That's it. For the next few days, we moved around each other like ghosts. She'd try to start conversations, offering to make dinner, asking if I wanted to watch a movie. I declined each time, politely but firmly. The connection that had once defined us had thinned into nothing but practical coexistence. Then, 2 nights before I moved out, her younger sister Hannah came over to help her pack. After Leela went to bed, Hannah lingered near the door. Evan, can I tell you something? She asked hesitantly. I nodded. She knew, Hannah said softly. About the proposal. She found the ring receipt in your car weeks before she talked to you. She told me she panicked. She didn't want to marry you, but she didn't want to lose the comfort either. For a moment, my heart went still. Then everything made sense. The timing, her sudden honesty, the calm way she delivered all of it was premeditated. She thought if she friend-zoned you, she could keep what she wanted, Hannah continued, eyes full of guilt. She didn't expect you to actually let her go. I thanked Hannah and told her not to worry. But as soon as she left, I sat in the half-empty living room, surrounded by boxes and fading memories, and felt something inside me close completely. The next morning, I confronted Lila. She didn't even try to deny it. I was scared, she said through tears. I thought if we stayed close, maybe I'd change. Maybe you'd wait. I did wait, I said. For years. But the problem was never time. The problem was you were never in love with me. She cried quietly after that. I didn't. When I finally moved out, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated, just free. The kind of freedom that comes after finally walking out of a locked room you've built yourself. The new condo was small, but bright. For the first few days, I woke up to silence and sunlight spilling across the tatami floor. No tension, no mixed signals. Just peace, and then, unexpectedly, came Mua, friend of a colleague. A graphic designer who loved quiet cafes and rainy afternoons. From the first date, she looked at me like I was someone worth choosing, not just keeping around. Her affection was simple, uncalculated, genuine. When she visited my condo for the first time, she said, "This place feels happy, like it finally belongs to someone who wants to be here." And for the first time in a long time, I realized she was right. Sometimes the universe doesn't break your heart to punish you, it breaks it to redirect you. And when the storm clears, you see where you were meant to go all along. 6 months had passed since I left that apartment, the one that once felt like home, then turned into a museum of everything we lost. Life had grown quiet again, but this time it wasn't loneliness. It was peace. I still saw Lila sometimes from a distance. Sapporo wasn't that big. Once at a cafe, once at a bookstore. Each time she looked smaller, as if regret had taken something from her she couldn't get back. I didn't hate her. I didn't wish her pain. But I also didn't reach out. Some wounds aren't meant to be reopened, not even to prove they've healed. Mew, on the other hand, became sunlight in human form. She didn't ask about my past. She didn't try to fix me. She just existed beside me, gentle, real, and present. She taught me that love doesn't have to hurt to be meaningful. It doesn't have to be earned through patience or sacrifice. Sometimes it just fits. One night, as snow began to fall again, exactly 1 year since the day Leela said, "I just want to be friends," Mew and I stood on my balcony, 2 mugs of hot cocoa in hand. The city below was quiet, blanketed in white. She looked up at me and smiled. "You look like you're remembering something." I nodded. "Yeah, but it doesn't hurt anymore." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Then you've really healed." And I realized she was right, because healing isn't forgetting the person who hurt you. It's remembering them without anger, and choosing not to go back. I'd spent years waiting for someone to love me the way I loved her. But in the end, the most powerful thing I ever did was to stop waiting as the snow thickened. I whispered a quiet goodbye, not to Leela, but to the version of myself that kept hoping she'd change. That night, Mew fell asleep beside me, her breathing soft and even. I stared at the ceiling, thinking of how strange life could be, how sometimes losing the person you thought was the one was the only way to meet the person who actually is. And maybe that's what love really is, not clinging, not chasing, but finally being still enough for the right person to find you.